Right. So, we've all seen those sci-fi movies like Transcendence and Ghost in the Shell, right? Where they like upload their minds. And
Right.
it got me thinking, like, what if we could actually transfer our consciousness to a machine? Like, is that even
I mean, it's a
possible?
big question, isn't it? And it might sound like pure science fiction, but there are
Yeah.
some actual theories suggesting it could actually be possible one day.
It's pretty wild.
So today we're going to do a deep dive into this whole consciousness transfer thing and
Yeah.
explore like both the mind-blowing possibilities and the kind of profound ethical and philosophical questions that it raises.
Yeah, I mean, where do we even begin? Like, how do you define consciousness?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's such a complex concept. I mean, we kind of all know what it is, like we experience it every day, but defining it, pinning it down, it's elusive,
Yeah.
you know? It's like trying to define, I don't know, the taste of blue or something. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
But maybe one way to think about it is like consciousness is this kind of tapestry, right? Woven from like all our memories and our
Yeah.
thoughts, our perceptions, and even our physical sensations.
Interesting.
It's deeply connected to our experience of the world, which is shaped by the fact that we exist in, these physical bodies.
Right. So if consciousness is so tied to our physical being, what happens if we like take that away?
Yeah.
Like, what if we transfer it into a machine? Would that even be the same us?
Yeah, and that gets right to the heart of the debate about identity and the self, right?
Right.
Some people argue that transferring consciousness would just be creating like a copy, like a digital duplicate,
Uh-huh.
but not really transferring you.
Mm-hmm.
Other people believe that it would be a genuine continuation of your consciousness, just in a different form.
Right. Right.
But it really makes you question, can the essence of who we are actually exist outside of our bodies?
It's like, imagine waking up one morning and like your mind is in a computer. Like, would you still feel like you? Like, same personality, same values, all that.
Well, it's really hard to say for sure, right? Our sense of self is built on like a whole lifetime of experiences and relationships and interacting with the world. And all of those experiences are filtered through our senses and shaped by our physical limitations.
Right.
So if we suddenly remove those limitations and just exist as like pure information,
Yeah.
who knows how our sense of self would adapt? Would it be like a smooth transition, or would we fundamentally change?
And like, let's say we could achieve this kind of digital existence.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that essentially make us immortal?
Right.
Like, no more aging, no more disease.
It's a tempting idea.
Yeah. Just pure consciousness chilling in the digital world.
Digital immortality.
Right.
But it makes you think about the meaning of life.
Yeah.
What's the role of mortality?
Right.
Some people say that, like, death actually gives meaning to life.
Mm-hmm.
Is that finite nature of our existence that kind of pushes us to make the most of our time, right?
Yeah.
So if we remove that endpoint, would life still have that same urgency, that same value?
Yeah. It's like, if you knew you would live forever, would you even bother, like, I don't know,
Right.
accomplishing things or having relationships?
Would it all become kind of meaningless?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about.
It is.
And then you got to think about the societal implication.
Bro, yeah.
Like, imagine widespread digital immortality.
Bro.
What would happen to our population? Resources. Would we end up with like a two-tier society
Right.
where the digital beings have like way more rights and privileges than us, the ones still stuck in these meat suits?
Right.
It's wild.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
Like, this technology, if it ever happens, could completely change everything.
everything, yeah.
Like what it means to be human, how we structure society, even basic ethics.
Absolutely.
Oh, speaking of ethics,
Yeah.
like, what about control and vulnerability? If our consciousness is in a machine, who owns that machine?
Right. Who has access? Could someone like hack into our digital selves and mess with us without us even knowing?
That's kind of scary.
It's a serious concern.
It is.
If our consciousness becomes data, then it becomes vulnerable to all the same stuff that plagues our digital world now, right? Breaches, manipulation,
Right. Right.
even theft, who knows?
So, like, how do we even begin to protect ourselves?
It's a huge challenge.
Yeah, it seems like the potential benefits come with a whole bunch of risks.
Yeah,
But I'm
definitely.
sure there's more to uncover here.
Oh, yeah,
This
duh.
is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, we've only scratched the surface.
Okay, so what's next? What else should we be thinking about?
Well, next time we'll dive into the current research, like what are scientists actually doing to try to understand and maybe even replicate consciousness?
Oh, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
I'm ready.
All right, so stay tuned for part 2, where we'll unpack the science behind this incredible concept and, really dig into the benefits and the risks of this technology.
All right, listeners. Until then, I think we all need a moment to process all of this.
I agree. It's a lot to take in.
Right.
But these questions we're talking about,
Yeah.
about consciousness, identity, what it means to be human,
Yeah,
these are like some of the most profound questions we can ask ourselves.
absolutely. So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive even deeper into this mind-blowing topic of consciousness transfer.
So welcome back to our deep dive into consciousness transfer.
Last time we got pretty deep into like the philosophical stuff and the
What?
ethics.
Lots to think about there.
For sure. But now I'm curious, like, what's actually happening in the science world? Are we anywhere close to actually being able to upload our minds?
Well, to be honest, not quite yet.
Okay.
But there's a ton of incredible research going on that's really helping us understand how the brain and consciousness work.
Cool.
One of the big areas is brain mapping.
Brain mapping.
Yeah, like trying to make a detailed map of the brain's structure
Okay.
and how all the different regions connect and talk to each other.
It's like a roadmap of the brain.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
sounds super complicated.
It is. It's like imagine trying to chart billions of neurons and
got it.
trillions of connections.
Yeah.
It's a massive undertaking.
Wow.
But there are projects like the Human Connectome Project.
Okay.
They're using like really advanced imaging to map these intricate pathways.
So it's like gathering a massive amount of data.
Oh, yeah, huge amounts.
And that's helping researchers understand how different parts of the brain work together.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're starting to get a handle on the hardware, so to speak.
Right.
But how do we go from that to understanding like the actual consciousness part?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Some researchers believe that if we can like really understand the physical structure of the brain
Right.
and how information moves through it,
Uh-huh.
we might actually be able to replicate that process in a digital form.
Whoa.
Yeah, they're looking into creating these large-scale simulations of the brain using super powerful computers.
So like building a digital brain from scratch?
Kind of, yeah.
It's wild.
Right. The idea is if we can build this virtual model that can actually process information and learn and even respond to things,
Okay.
it could give us clues about how consciousness comes about from all those neurons and networks interacting.
But even if we could build a digital brain that acts like a real one,
Yeah.
does that mean it would actually be conscious? Or is it more like a really good imitation?
Well, that's the big debate, right?
Yeah.
There's no, like, official test for consciousness.
Right.
So it's hard to say for sure whether a simulated brain would have those same kind of subjective experiences that we do. Some people think that consciousness emerges from the sheer complexity of the brain. So if the simulation is complex enough, maybe
Yeah.
it could become conscious too.
Mm.
Others think that consciousness is just fundamentally tied to our biology.
Okay.
Like it can't exist outside of a living system.
Interesting.
It's a tough question.
It is, but okay, let's say, just for fun, that we could actually figure out how to transfer consciousness to a machine.
Right.
Besides the immortality thing,
Right.
what would be some of the benefits?
Oh man, the possibilities are pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Like think about it. We could potentially boost our brain power,
Uh-huh.
improve our memories, even get rid of diseases that affect the brain.
No more Alzheimer's.
Yeah, potentially.
Wow.
No Parkinson's, even just like, those senior moments.
Right.
They could be gone.
And what about learning new things, like skills or languages?
Oh, yeah, imagine.
Could we download information right into our brains, like in the Matrix?
Exactly. Learning could become so much faster and easier.
That would be insane.
And it's not just individual benefits. Think about science.
Okay.
A digital consciousness could explore the universe in ways we can't even imagine now.
Right.
It could help us solve problems like climate change, poverty,
That'd be amazing.
right? It could revolutionize everything.
I'm starting to see the appeal. But we already talked about those ethical worries.
Right.
Are there, like, any practical risks that we should be thinking about?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like what?
Like any powerful technology, there's always the risk of misuse.
Right.
Like imagine someone hacking into your digital consciousness
Oh, gosh.
or copying it without your permission.
Yeah,
We'd need some super strong security to prevent that.
for sure.
And then there's the issue of access.
Oh, yeah, I was just thinking about
Like,
that.
would everyone have access to this technology?
Yeah.
Or would it just create a bigger gap between the haves and have-nots?
Like the people who can afford digital immortality and those who can't.
Exactly. It could become the ultimate privilege.
Whoa.
And that could lead to all sorts of social problems.
Yeah, for sure.
We'd have to be really careful about that.
And like, what happens to our bodies if our consciousness is transferred?
Yeah, that's another big one.
Do we just, like, leave them behind?
That's a tough question.
It is.
Some people think we could eventually transfer our consciousness into new bodies,
Oh, wow.
maybe even synthetic ones.
That's crazy.
Others think we should just focus on improving our current bodies
Yeah.
and living longer naturally.
So many different paths we could take.
Right. Each with its own benefits, risks, and ethical dilemmas.
Exactly. So it seems like there's a ton to consider here.
Oh, definitely.
We got the science, the implications, the ethics.
We're just getting started.
So what's next on our deep dive?
Well, next time we're going to step outside the purely scientific realm.
Okay.
We'll look at some alternative perspectives on consciousness transfer. Like, what do spiritual traditions say about it?
Oh, interesting.
We'll look at some philosophical criticisms of transhumanism and even consider what the future might hold if consciousness isn't limited by our bodies anymore.
I can't wait to dive into that.
It's going to be a wild ride.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, we've spent the last two parts, like, really digging into this idea of consciousness transfer.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey so far.
Totally. And, like, we've covered the science, the potential, the ethical dilemmas.
Right, we've looked at it from a lot of different angles.
But, you know, a lot of what we've talked about has been from, like, the transhumanist perspective, right? Like, that technology can help us overcome our limitations.
That's a really common perspective, especially in this field.
Right. But are there other ways of thinking about this whole thing?
Oh, absolutely.
Like what?
Well, for starters, a lot of spiritual traditions believe that consciousness isn't just a product of the brain.
Okay.
They see it as something deeper.
Deeper, like what?
Like maybe a soul or a spirit that exists beyond the physical body.
So like something eternal.
Right, something that transcends the material world.
So if that's true,
yeah,
then trying to transfer consciousness to a machine wouldn't really work.
Well, it might be missing the point entirely.
How so?
Imagine trying to capture, like, the essence of a person by copying their shadow.
Okay.
You might get a rough outline, but you wouldn't have the substance,
Right.
the depth, that unique spark that makes them who they are.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
It makes you think about what truly defines us, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Like, is it really just the information in our brains? Or is there something more to it?
That's the question, isn't it? And some philosophers argue that this whole idea of consciousness transfer is based on a misunderstanding of what it means to be human.
Oh, interesting.
They think our experiences,
Yeah.
our relationships, our physical bodies, all of it
Yeah.
shapes who we are in a way that can't be replicated in a digital world.
So it's not just about the data.
Right.
It's about the whole context.
Exactly.
The way we experience the world, the way we connect with others.
Our consciousness is shaped by our senses, our emotions, even our flaws.
Yeah.
Take all that away and put it in a digital realm, and you might create something new, but it wouldn't really be us.
And there's also that argument that focusing too much on technology could actually distract us from solving the real problems.
Right, like the root causes of suffering and inequality.
Exactly.
Like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone.
Yeah.
It might hide the problem for a bit, but it doesn't fix anything.
So we have to be careful about seeing technology as a cure-all.
Absolutely. It's important to address the underlying issues, not just try to bypass them.
So it seems like this consciousness transfer thing isn't just a scientific or technological question.
Right.
It's a philosophical one,
Definitely.
an ethical one,
Absolutely.
and even a societal one.
It touches on pretty much every aspect of our existence.
So where do we go from here? What does the future hold if this technology actually becomes real?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Nobody knows for sure, but one thing is clear.
What's that?
This has the potential to completely change what it means to be human.
It's both exciting and scary at the same time.
Totally. It forces us to confront some of the biggest questions we can ask.
Like what?
What is consciousness? What's the meaning of life? What does it even mean to be human?
Yeah, deep stuff.
No easy answers.
So it seems like this consciousness transfer thing, it's not just a technological issue.
No, not at all.
It's something we all need to be thinking about.
It's a conversation that needs to involve Everyone, not just scientists.
Right. Scientists, philosophers, policymakers,
Everyday people.
everyone.
Because ultimately, the future isn't something that just happens to us.
Yeah.
We create it together.
And the choices we make today will shape that future.
Absolutely.
Well, we've explored a lot of different perspectives in this deep dive,
We've barely scratched the surface.
but it's a good starting point for this conversation.
Definitely. And we hope it sparked some new thoughts and questions for our listeners.
Yeah, we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, challenge assumptions,
Keep an open mind.
and be part of the conversation about what it means to be human in this ever-evolving technological world.
Because it's a conversation that will only become more important as we move forward.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a fascinating journey.
We'll see you next time.
Until then, keep those minds open and keep asking those big questions.